So, welcome to the next episode of our podcast Strategiewerkstatt, or in English, the Strategy Workshop. This is our hitchhiker's guide through strategy, if you like. Today with me is Samuel with a very interesting story that might go against some agile wisdom. But before we dive into that, let's see. Samuel, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here, Marcus. And yes, I mean, like you did a nice intro. I'm not sure if it's against the agile. I was like, say, like, it will be like just a little bit evolution, a different look. But let's see where the discussion will bring us.
Let's see.
Yeah. So first of all, like, hi, everybody. My name is Samuel Snopko. I'm at the moment the head of the product and Storyblok. It's a content management system, headless content management system. Basically, a startup from Austria. We already grew in last 6 years, yes, to 2026. So from 2022, we went through the seed to Series C right now, and we are over 350 people. So you can imagine like going from like 2 founders to basically to 350. It's like a big journey, and I really like a lot of explosion, a lot of like discussions and a lot of decisions to make. Yeah, my background very quickly. I started as a software developer. I studied at the universities for software developing. I spent some time in Java world. I spent then some time in the front-end world, mostly around the JavaScript frameworks, etc. Did some not podcasting, but meetups, organizing meetups, and that's like also like Dominic, the CEO of the Storyblok, basically. And then I moved slowly, basically, to the directions of developer relations or also solution engineering. So that was my first 3 years in Storyblok, basically meeting all of our like customers at the time, finding out what we need to build, also like working on the developer communities. And then I switched to head of product, where I'm like more, I would say like more responsible for the strategy, where the product is heading, how we are doing stuff, what to prioritize, which is like most probably the biggest part of my day, basically. Yeah.
Cool.
So Marcus, where we are starting.
It's quite the journey, also your own, but also the journey of Storyblok, to say starting from 2 to now 300. That's like massive. How many years did it take you to go from 2 to 300?
So it's like 2 to 300. I think it was like under 4 something. Wow. And then of course, like we are like still like getting new people. Some people already like leaving. We are already like quite, I would say, like older now. Now we are hiring you heavily also again. So I think like we are hitting like end of this year, it should be like about 400. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. Wow. This is intense and comes with its own host of opportunities, let's put it that way.
Oh yeah. So if anybody like interested, they check our website. Definitely we are looking for all type of roles. So like from sales to engineers, like especially like the product team will be growing this year very heavily. But I think we are partially here to talk about the product and the engineering, but not exactly for hiring.
Okay. So check Storyblok, check for opportunities. They are growing like hell. Samuel, in the pre-discussion we had before we started this episode, you told me that you were starting out with Scrum, like some people said to be a very rigid agile framework, working from sprints and then using that methodology. And now you moved away from that. Before we like unveil what you moved to, so why did you do the move away from Scrum? What have you seen within Scrum that you said that does not resonate with the way we work at Storyblok?
Yeah, that's a very good question to start. So I'm not going to reveal what we are doing now, but I don't think so. It's so far from Scrum. So to be very also like honest, I have nothing against the Scrum. I was like at the university, we were already like we were literally like, and for like we tried Scrum in 2000. So like when it was like the new cool idea. So the Scrum is good, and it's also like, but everything has like some pros and cons. And one of the cons, I think, like we realize is like, as we were like growing as a hell as a startup, and like we would like to be very agile, and we wanted to be like, we really wanted to empower our developers, not only our developers, but engineering, like Q&A, DevOps, backenders, frontenders, product owners, to do their decisions. But the struggle we hit it was like kind of like we were missing like the whole goal, like where we are heading. And this was the time when we were like working already like in these groups, where it was like I would say like a group of people responsible for part of the application. So it was like something for visual editor, then somebody was responsible more for the subscriptions. But these groups were like very isolated columns, basically. So it was a silos that, and it's like work amazing, like on the paper, and in the big organization, I would say that's the way to go. I feel like Scrum is more like, I would even like argue is more for those like bigger organization where you have the luxury, like you can work on this one problem very, like, like you draw borders, you set the lines, this is your playground, and you work here on this one problem. This, you get a specialist from each division, so from the design, from UX, from accessibility, from front end, back end, DevOps, and everybody's like going to focus on that part. But as we were like growing, and there was like a lot of new people always like coming, and it was like we didn't have the luxury. There was like the person who touched something, and you need to keep them discussing the stuff, like what is the focus. And especially nowadays, we are like switching, like what is the next big thing? Like with the AI, you couldn't predict AI like half year ago ahead. So like nobody knew about like, is it coming ahead? It will be so heavy. So where I'm heading with that is that basically we get to the point where the Scrum was like basically was like limiting us. It was slowing us down because like, yes, we came with a plan. We said like, we want to build this feature. We have all the ceremonies of the Scrum. We did the poker. We did the like, hey, this is like how many points we need. We put together like the burn-on graph at the beginning of the sprint, and it was like the 2-week sprint. And then we basically, the developers or the designers and everybody start working on it. And then we could see how the burn-on is going down. The problem of this is like, you all focus about like about this like methodology. You don't focus on like what is delivered at the end. And I think that also has the Scrum started. So it could be that was like our mistake somewhere there that we were doing. But at the end of the day, as a head of product, and also before that, as I was like, as a solution engineer working with the customers, I was like, customers asking for some feature. I'm like, hey guys, we need this feature. This is like really cool. Like this is a thing customers wanted. And then 2 months later, we were still working on it. 7 sprints done. All the burnouts looks good, but there's like no value for the customer because like it was like always like the going down, but never like, delivering the final stuff. Like, because like you can always like show that you're working on the tickets, they get done, but there's no result. And this, we need to switch. We need to think about how to get away from like just focusing on the work being done to really like deliver the value.
If I may jump into that. So I think that's one of the myths of Scrum, right? So if you really do it by the book, you should be delivering value to the customer at the end of the sprint, right? I mean, that's the idea behind Scrum, to go away from a 5-year plan to like 2-week cycles and then deliver something to the customer, right? If you didn't do that, so maybe it was like more creating silos and like maybe more excuses to like create output, but no outcome, right? So Exactly, chart was going down, but there was never like business value at the end.
Yeah, exactly. But as I said, like I'm not the one to like point fingers to anybody. So I'm not saying who is the fall of. It's just really as you grow and you really like change it. Like we were changing 2 times a year processes. That's the life of all the young startups. Like you are like improving, new people coming. I started and I was like responsible for something that like 50 people are now like working on. So like there are processes coming into it. And this switch, so it's different to go and like, I can go to huge companies like maybe Microsoft who is working with Scrum, and I take them and I cannot take their processes and apply it on our small team of like, that time we were like 50 people in the product together, because we didn't have the numbers and that power that the bigger company have. So, and then if you have a 5 years, as you said, like the plan, you can cut it to pieces, but you need a lot of processes and a lot of preparation to make it proper. And then you can do that into cycle sprints. If you, every 3 cycles, you need to adapt on like react to something new that maybe your big customer needs, or you have some issue, or there's like new technology coming in, then it's a little bit different. So we were looking like what and how we could imagine it basically.
So it was not that the 2-week cycle was too slow. It was that there was ceremonies that like gave you the impression that you make progress, but you didn't do any progress towards the customer.
Yes, now, that would be like, 1 sentence.
That's 1 sentence. 1 sentence. Okay, so now your Scrum era is over. What did you change and what did you end up with?
So yeah, that was interesting times. So we were like already discussing this for some time, especially with also our head of product. We had some discussions like where and what direction we would go.
Yep.
And by accident, we landed up like, we were like not looking for the new methodology, to be honest. And we also were not looking like we want to replace the Scrum. It was like how we could imagine to do it better. And the first thing was like, okay, the 2 week cycles are like, or like sprints are too short. We need to get also like move the decision power more to the developers to understand like what is the business, what is the value we want to deliver to customer. And it's like that don't do just what we tell you, like, hey, there's a feature A and the feature A needs to have like these sub features or these functions, how much work you need to do that. But like understand like, hey, like this customer have this problem, how we can solve it. Like, and this is like our proposal. Do you see maybe different way to do that? Or like, do you see like this is doable in 2 cycle sprints or what we can do in the cycle sprints? And that was like where we by coincidence, basically after some discussions landed up that we went from the Scrum to Shape Up. But again, like the first even like falls was like without knowing what we are doing. It was the shape. But then we found out like, oh, there is a Shape Up, which is from 7 Signals, or this book, the guys like wrote the book Rework also, and they have the Basecamp you heard probably about. And they basically also wrote about like how do they do the work, and they call it Shape Up. And the difference is like in the Scrum, you're looking like what is the amount of work like to deliver this. So you want to deliver the feature, and you say like you need 3 months, for example, and then you kind of cut it to the sprints basically. So the point is like you always like say like, okay, it's like how much work I need to do. And the biggest difference here is and this is very hard by the way to do, is switch to like what is your appetite. So instead of like saying like, okay, we need to do this feature, is like, okay, I am like, hey, we would like to get this feature because there's a customer A who can pay for the, let's say 100K. And then, but I have an appetite of 3 weeks or like 5 weeks or 7 weeks and 2 founder developers. And then the question is, instead of that, asking like, are we able to deliver exactly that feature, is more like, what is possible to deliver in that time and with the resources we get from that feature that make a value for the customer. And that's what we are trying to do basically. And that's in a simplified way, the Shape Up. So the decisions, or a lot of the decisions, are moved to the also developers about like understanding the problem, and then they can also always propose like why we are doing all of this if we need only like this little part is 90% and of the problem. So, and that is very often a problem that if we don't understand, we spend on the 10% that maybe the customers even don't need, or like, yes, it will make them a little bit more happy, but it's not that groundbreaking change that will make them happy. It's already like the first part what they need, and after that, that will satisfy them at the 70. So, and that was the switch basically that we did. So we moved to the Shape Up, and with that we also like broke the silos. So basically we said like, okay, if you are a front-end developer, mostly like usually you can work on like multiple, like different parts of the front-end. You don't need to focus only on one part. That doesn't mean like we don't have a specialist. It's more like you just don't work always with the same group of people. So you also like can share the knowledge you already created. You have a new ideas creation. The seniors more often working like the juniors, or like there's like different possibilities happening. And sorry, the most important, they got for this 7 weeks at the end. So they work basically on the feature. There's a 5 weeks of development and 2 weeks of the cooldown. The cooldown is more about all that TypeScript changes, releases we do. So in the cooldown weeks, usually you shouldn't develop, but you should take care of the healthiness of the system. And then there's a 5 weeks when you get a full focus, like you work on this one feature for 5 weeks, you will figure out how to do it. So at the beginning, it's very slow, and then you go down very quickly. They call it hill chart. So you see as how they're figuring out what to do at the first, like
goes uphill and then,
and then get up, and then like, now we know how to do it. And then suddenly like everything go like it's speeding up at the end.
That's interesting, because I see a lot of companies that feel that the 2 week cycles are too slow, right? So you were moving from 2 weeks, now you're moving to this like five weeks uphill, 2 weeks cool down, right? To like more 7 weeks, which gives you a longer perspective. Other companies go the opposite. They say, hey, I don't want to wait 2 weeks until the next deployment. I want to basically deploy daily, right? And they then move to Kanban or any other like more flow heavy alternatives. So it's interesting that you say, hey, we might have been too fast. So we haven't seen any like business value for the customer. So how does this work with Shape Up now influence the strategy? How does this influence the way you think about product?
So how that's also like changed a little bit. So But this is like a little bit unconnected. Necessary is not about the Scrum against the shape up in this case. And in that case, what we do is like we have a cycles, which is like right now 7 weeks. In those 7 week cycles, you try to give a focus to your development team. So ideally, we have always one team who's focusing on the maintenance, and they like a protection for the rest of the team. So they really should because the problem is like if you switching the context, that's by the way the problem of the Scrum very often. Also, if the team that works on the feature, they need to switch to something to fix because
and then you lose.
I don't know what happened.
You lose focus.
Exactly, and you're losing them. So this is what we do by the maintenance. And what we do in the product management is like we are basically 1 week ahead of them. We are running like a pre-betting and betting cycles. And what is that? Is that basically we don't have now, if you go to our like website, you will find a roadmap. I don't like to call it roadmap because for me, the roadmap is something like I already know how to get from point A to point B. You know, like if you go to Google Maps and you say like, I want to get to Vienna, and it's like, this is exactly the road. And that's the roadmap. And I'm like, that's not exactly true because I like more like we thinking in a vision. I know like these are the features I want to have in my application. And this is where we are heading. But this dynamically changing. It's a living document. It's not like yesterday I decided and for the next half year is like fixed and it will be done like in this order because it's changing. It's changed a lot. There are like agentic AI now. There's LLMs before that. And then who knows what will come in 2 months. So we need to react. So we always do is like, I have features like a feature request, internally, external, like a lot of them. Then we have a public, let's call it vision, because we are going to also change it very soon to vision as a page. And then basically a 1.5 cycle, so that's around like 9 weeks before the cycle starts. So now let's say we are on the cycle 17. So tomorrow I will have a call with our product leadership about the cycle. Correct me. About the cycle 17 that will start in 4 weeks. I will have a meeting where we as a product management will decide like what we would like to build. And we need to sell it to the key decision makers. We call it betting table. There's like also people from sales, people from support, solution engineers, and we have like really hard discussion because we can choose, for example, 5 to 7 new features that we will be working on. Also like the tech depths and everything. And this is the bet. And then these can change. So that's literally like what we want to work on 4 weeks from now, but we will start work, will be decided like these 4 weeks before. And this makes you dynamically and very actively react whatever is happening in the world is with your application or whatever happening that's going on.
So I really need some time to like wrap my head around this like concept because in my mind, speeding up always or like often is triggered with, hey, we also need to make sure that we are even more dynamic, right? Or taking that step back, I think in some cases also makes sense. I think I really need to like take a week off, like think how this might look like. One image that pops in my mind when you talk about roadmap. So I always talk about roadmap in a way that the next, let's say, couple of weeks or months, that's what you draw with ink, and everything after that is drawn with pencil. So you might still have that vision of where it goes to, but it's not drawn in ink so that you cannot erase it. So that's the way I often think about roadmap, to say it's not a 5 years plan, it's not even a 1 year plan, it's the plan for the next cycle, be that a quarter, be that 7 weeks in your case. So that's one description I often use. A question to shape up before we like wrap up the session. Scrum in itself is a very, or as it started out, was a very like team sport, right? That's also why these silos were created. And then later on, there were like scaled versions of Scrum with funny names like safe or unsafe or less and more or whatnot, making fun of those. So how does Shape Up scale? And what is missing for you right now in this like idea of Shape Up that you are working on to implement and like make the Storyblok version out of it?
Yeah, maybe this will be a little bit controversial. So what I would be like if I would be arguing with about the Scrum is that the Scrum is very ticket based, if you know what I mean. There is not feeling of the value. You focus on the tickets, and it's very easy to get to this rabbit hole that you, and it could happen also to me as a developer. Like, and I focus on like I want to finish all my tickets, and then I have like free time, kind of like because my work is done, and the tickets you very often getting from outside. So like the responsibility is moved to somebody like Scrum Master, prepare the tickets, and then you rate the tickets and you focus on the tickets and you focus on the burnout. And the shape up, you are responsible. So we are not telling our teams that how many tickets you can have one ticket for 3 weeks in theory. It's up to you because you as a team decide and you decide what is best for you. And it's very scalable at the end, but you need to have a very responsible senior people, of course, and it's more creative. So you give the power and the creativity back to the team, to engineers, and then you basically give them. They can scale as much as you need because you can create like multiple teams. You can actively like change. So sometimes, for example, in Cycle we have 4 teams. Sometimes we have 6 teams. Sometimes we have 3 teams. It again depends what we are building, and then you scale up. And then if you have extra, you bring a new team and you want to let them work on something, you can tell them, okay, you have 2 cycles to work on this big idea that we have, and it goes up.
Okay.
Absolutely, I agree. As soon as you want to get back to the stability, so let's say you are in the finances or like insurance industry where you have a very rigid processes, then I would say the combination. There should be like probably the teams that work more on the Scrum. They do this very small iteration, and then they can be very clear about like, you do this is what we need to do. And then on the side, you maybe have teams of the shape up who are like working on new products, or like really, because this is more about like how you iterate, how to create the product. And that's the power of the shape up. So I don't know if you see, but I think they are like very two methodologies could work together.
It scales because it allows you to like reshape your organization to the current outcome you want to produce, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And then especially what I like is like, like if we go for work on the feature and we know like these are the right group or like right combination of people from front and back and etc., then we could put together the right people instead of like sticking with a team that already existed and suddenly they don't have like enough knowledge on some topic in our.
Samuel, thank you very much for your journey. I have things to think about, especially if like going from this like siloed approach that Scrum sometimes gives to a different type of flexibility by extending the cycles again. I think this was super inspiration to think about speed in a different way, right? I keep my fingers crossed that your growth target of this year will happen. Folks, go check out Storyblok. They might not be growing this year. They might even be growing next year. So I don't know, potentially. Samuel, I keep my fingers crossed. Thanks for having you on the show. Yeah. And famous last words. Mic drop moment,
thank you
Samuel.
for the invitation. I always like feel free to reach out to me. I am mostly active now on LinkedIn. I mean like there, but if you want, and if you're interested in Shape Up, there are like amazing resources. It's free. You can just go to Google Shape Up. You will get to the book. It's a very short book that you can read in one day on weekend, and you will get a point of it, I think. So thank you very much for listening.
So thank you very much again.
Have a nice day.